Get started here with Club Finances. Thank you everybody for coming. I'll go ahead and do the disclosure. Any statements and viewpoints made by myself do not represent Core Trust Bank or any of its subsidiaries. Get that out of the way.
They have subsidiaries?
They do. Club Finances. Start from the start. I was feeling my inner what? No, working for the weekend. What's the band? No, Canadian band. Loverboy. Start from the start. Everybody's working for the weekend. So let's start from the start. Some of this is not going to be something that you need to do because you've already established your club name. But I'm going to start from the beginning. So the first thing you need to do is get your club name, figure it out. Then you need to record your name, your club name, with the Secretary of State, with the state of Minnesota. Okay? And then once you've done that, you need to renew it annually. And you can do that electronically for free. In the state of Minnesota, after you first get yourself registered with the Secretary of State, we'll send you an email. I've got mine already last week. Just reminding you, Scott, your club needs to be renewed annually by December 31st. Have a nice day, Secretary of State. So I can go in and I will do that electronically, pull up their website, pop in, check Scott Wakefield, here's the address, click renew my Secretary of State. So that is also known as being in Certificate of Good Standing. Now you'll remember that because we'll use that when we go forward. Articles of incorporation. Don't be confused about incorporation. Articles of incorporation are a document used at a financial institution that gives the powers within your club. So how many people are required to sign a document? Who can borrow money from the bank? Gail can borrow the money from the bank. Yeah, so in articles of incorporation, you need to have that completed. So those are the signatures required. And then also bylaws and SROs. You need to develop bylaws and SROs within your snowmobile club. Board of directors. Some clubs have a board of directors, some just have officers. If you have a board of directors, what do? They review and approve the annual budget that's prepared by your treasurer. They review the financial statements. They also authorize that 2 of the signers on the board of directors are going to be signers on the checking account at the bank. They also review all contracts and approve all non-budgeted items that are over a certain dollar amount. So when you're working on those budgets, and we'll get to budgets a little bit further down the road here, if you have non-budgeted items that come up, the board has to approve those over a certain dollar amount. You set that dollar amount. Okay, within your club. So if it's over $500 and we only put in $1,000, or we only put in $100 for funeral expenses to pay, and unfortunately 3 guys in the club went off the ditch, you get the picture, you're over your $100 that's in your budget, and you say any expenditure over $50 needs to go to the board of directors if it's not budgeted, that's where this kind of comes in. So establish that dollar amount. Officers, obviously, vice president, president, secretary, and then the treasurer. One of the most important people in your organization is your treasurer. So what do as a treasurer? You're operating, You're operating the day-in-day operations of the organization. Like me, you prepare the financial reports to the board, so that's going to be your profit and loss, and then get together with your balance sheet. So what I'm doing by telling you these things is I'm leading you up to further things that you're going to need to be able to go to the bank and borrow money. So there is a reason why I'm talking about these things. So you sit together with your budget. So when I do my budget, I used to do the budgets all by myself, and then it was just a worthless amount of time because I would present the budget and then they would say, but what about this? Or that's not our vision, that's your vision, or that's your thought. I'm like, okay, well, screw that, let's throw this away. Let's all get together and let's start talking about the budget together as a group. And they're like, oh, well, you know, the groomer, you know, it's got 12,000 hours on it. We probably need to start thinking about putting away some money in a groomer account, start to prepare to buy that. So that's where you start to work with, oh, I didn't know we had 12,000 hours on our groomer. I'm the treasurer, I'm doing the day-to-day operations, I don't even been in the groomer. So that's where you start to work with other people within your organization to try to develop a budget that's gonna make sense. Hey, we're gonna start get a computer bought, a laptop with some club management on it, it's gonna cost some money. We need to develop the budget so we can get that put in there. The treasurer needs to be the one other, or at least one signer on the checking accounts. Needs to be the treasurer. Because the treasurer is the one that's looking at the account on a day-to-day basis. The treasurer is the one that's saying, I'm authorizing you to do that expenditure. So they need to be signed on at the bank. The treasurer also reconciles the bank statements and records those towards the checks. So the checks have to balance to the statements and then reports that to the board or the members depending on the way you're set up in your organization. Okay, so that's my job as a treasurer. I get that statement, most of them are after the fact, or maybe they're late, but if you sign up to e-statements, you can get the statements electronically, and then let's start checking off those deposits and checking off those checks. Now checks don't clear all the time if somebody holds a check. We have a guy that does welding repairs to our club equipment, and he's historically poor at bookwork. I'm a welder, I hate the paperwork stuff. So what he does is he just takes our check, staples it to the invoice, and throws it in a drawer, and it sits there until he's done welding enough that, hey, maybe I should make some deposits. So 6 months later, here comes a check, trolling along, that shows up in your bank statement 6 months later. Don't get frustrated by that. Don't get overexcited. It happens on a daily basis. With electronic banking and technology in banking, things are clearing quicker. So a lot of that stuff in your statement should have cleared, but you still get the one guy that just kind of screws everything up. And so you need to tell the board that. Scott, there's an error here, blah, 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 blah. It's not an error, it just hasn't cleared yet. Yep, so it works with the board to have the financial policies and procedures in place, monitors the cash reserves, 1 year of expenses and savings or in CDs. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we get into the budgeting, but he's the one that he or she are the one that you're gonna rely on to have that extra 1 year's worth of expenses in a reserve account. So if you know what your expenses are, and you will because the treasurer will tell you, so let's say we spent $43,000 last year, you better have at least $43,000 in a savings account that doesn't get touched or a CD. That should be your goal as a club, to have that. Some clubs get that, and some clubs don't. Some clubs are well over that. Is the budget consistent with the club's mission statement or strategic plan of the vision? And we'll get a little bit more on that in the budget. But he works with the treasurer, or he or she works with the board and the budget to make sure that it fits the mission, the strategic plan, or the vision. Reviews the account signers. Here's a big one. People come and leave the account, or the club, and at the bank, nobody takes them on. Or maybe the new person, you've been elected treasurer, congratulations, get to work. And then nobody's put them on at the bank. So it could be 10, 20 years old. I mean, we have people at the township, some of them aren't even around anymore. I mean, they're not alive anymore, and they're still on the bank account. So the treasurer's job is to make sure the people that are elected to the positions that are on the accounts are the people that are on the accounts. It isn't that hard to do, but it gets missed all the time. Are you using up-to-date, when you think about up-to-date modern accounting principles and systems and software? Here's the guy that did everything on paper on a Word document, right? Check your, okay, is that on there now? So are you using Excel or are you using QuickBooks? and are using some other software. In this day and age, that's the software to use. It's gonna eliminate, I got caught. So I'm the township treasurer, I deal with $500,000, and it was on a balance sheet. It wasn't, not that I got caught, but it was on a balance sheet. And I put down the last year's expenses, and when I transferred it over, I missed a digit. But it was $50,000 of a digit. And so a little old man had nothing to do on a hot summer day, so he went through my financial presentation I made at the annual meeting in March, and came to the township meeting and said, Scott's off, the treasurer's off, 50 grand. I'm like, there's no way I can be off 50 grand. I've never been off $50,000. I said, what are you talking about? Oh, on your balance sheet. And I'm like, okay, I look at the balance sheet, and I flip-flopped the numbers is what I did. So it had no material effect on anything, and it was the 2019 expenses. But if I'd been using Excel or QuickBooks, I would have caught that stuff. So even myself is guilty of not having the up-to-date software. I do now, obviously, I do now. Let's talk about IRS reporting. So Doug talked about a little bit about that, and Rick was talking too about the 501c3s and the 501c4s. So this is postcard reporting time. Very easy to do. It's a little teeny postcard that you put together. It's a $9.90 if you're under $50,000 in gross income in a year. So you go, and I don't have, I do have a website that you can go to, but you need to go really to the IRS website for nonprofit reporting. And there you can go in. So I put in Snowmobile Club, Scott Wakefield treasurer, and ask you, where are your receipts, gross receipts in a 12-month calendar year, less than $50,000? If you check the box X, you say, okay, and you hit accept, and you've just filed your 990N. I print that off, and then I bring it to the board and the Snowmobile Club members and say, the 990 has been filed.
Are your benchmark payments considered receipts?
Yes. Yep, yep, they would be. So then you're gonna be in your, yes, Rick?
One minor one there, when you say under $50,000, normally under 50,000 is what it says in the rule book.
Normally.
Yeah.
So if you had that one anomaly,
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's say you get an RTP grant to buy a groomer, which happened in our club situation. All of a sudden, we had an extra $75,000 in receipts. That's not a normal situation, so you can still stay with the 990.
stay with the 990, okay? And we had that same case happen in another organization, but she's an accountant that volunteers, and so she jumped to the 990 EZ for the 1 year, and then she's gonna go back to the 990. So, two ways of looking at doing it, but I know that we did that. We had money in a community fund and they kicked us out, so they wrote us a check for $76,000. Well, that popped us over. She said I did the EZ for 1 year, we'll go back to the 990N. And then if you're gonna be over 200,000, then you got the 990, which is gonna be a full basic tax return. Call your accountant on that one. You guys can do the 990N. I know you're all capable of doing it. In a 990 EZ, you can probably handle that. But if you're over 200,000 in gross receipts, I would suggest you go to an accountant and get that done. If you fail to file a 990 consecutively in 3 years, you automatically lose your tax exempt status. You automatically lose your tax exempt status. And they don't necessarily tell you that you've done that, but you have. If you have any information, then go ahead to the IRS website. It talks about exempt profits, what's required for filings. Okay? Let's talk about the budget.
Excuse me for interrupting again, but I will tell you from recent personal experience, if you fail to file those things, they will remind you.
Okay? But I haven't done it. I haven't failed, so.
Well, I did an EZ have been doing it for years, and I got a bounce back, just 2 weeks ago that said I hadn't filed the 990 EC. I went back or perhaps you filed it under a different tax ID number. And I went back and looked at the one that had been filed, and the last digit of the tax ID number somehow hadn't gotten printed on the form. And the computer picked up on that.
So when I put the digits in, you have to kind of watch them to go away before you go on to the next okay kind of deal.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's kind of what happened.
Well, this was filed on a paper return, so.
Oh, well then, okay.
So, but it still caught it within just a
Interesting.
couple months.
Wow, interesting, okay. Well, I know they're looking for money, so they're gonna hire, well, we won't get into the political part, right? 80,000 more agents? Okay, did I say that out loud? Oh, you guys in the back can hear that, good. You thought about it out loud. Let's talk about the budget. Can I just get a show of hands, how many people in your clubs do budgets? Wow. Kinda? Okay. Okay, wow, okay, well, this will be something new for you. So I've been doing budgets for, I don't know, kinda like a long time, okay? Yeah, cause it kinda really, like I said, it's really part of your vision statement, kinda your vision of where you wanna go with the club, part of your strategic plan. Do any of you guys talk about strategic plans at all, or? You do, okay. So raise your hand if you do a strategic plan. All right. Well, this is good, this is an education thing, all right, I like it. All right, so the budget obviously is your annual financial plan. It's a little bit of a crystal ball exercise. So maybe that's why you don't do it, cause it's maybe not black and white, a little gray area, but it's a really good thing to do and very eye-opening for your club members. You should be doing it. So the first step is you take last year's expenses and income, and that's your baseline to start. And then you get together, like I said, you talk to your members. What are you guys thinking about doing? Are we gonna buy a groomer this year? We're gonna do something else, or we're gonna build a clubhouse, or you know, are we gonna start paying our groomer operators? We've never done that before. So let's start to look and work on what that's gonna cost. Then you kind of outline your new goals and purchases for the club in writing, and then determine the cost. And then you start the budget period from January 1 to December 31st. Then you put in your 2-year income and expenses for your comparisons, and then your budget proposal. So what I do is I lay it out, 2019, 2020, and propose 2021. So then the members can look at, well, what did we spend on club meetings? Well, holy crap, we spent $500 in 2019 for club meetings. What we were doing there?
Food.
Well,
Booze.
booze, right? Okay, booze. No. So we ended up going somewhere and had to rent it where we were normally at a different guy's property and charges. So that was the difference there. So it gives you the opportunity to look at the comparison and what are you seeing for trends in your budget, and then how you should change it. It might be surprising for some of your clubs that are doing that. And then I always note significant variances, and I put a little asterisk on the bottom of the budget with a footnote. Treasurer says, you know, electric bill way out of whack. What the hey is going on here? It's like, oh, well, we've got 3 groomers now, and we have a heated shop, so now the cost just went up. Okay, well that makes sense then. You know, nonprofits, on the budget, nonprofit doesn't mean no profit. But the board may not distribute the profits amongst themselves, and that's what defines them as a nonprofit. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but you'd be surprised. Okay, so things aren't working real well. We've got a little bit of money, but we want to go to the bank and we want to borrow some money to buy a laptop and club management system. I was thinking about that when you were talking about that, Mike.
Don't buy it, get it in the cloud.
Get it in the cloud.
Subscribe to it.
So what am I gonna want when you come into the bank? I'm gonna want a certificate of good standing. So that's back what we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, right? So you went in there, you did your annual a renewal of that, I want a copy of that. If you don't have a copy, I'll go to the Secretary of State's website and I'll pull it up and make sure that you are. I need to know those articles of incorporation. Who's gonna be liable for this debt? And who are the signatures that are gonna be required? Who's signing on this note? What are you gonna do about cash secured versus down payment? So if you're gonna buy a groomer and it's $265,000 and you have $100,000 in your account, so you need to come in and you wanna borrow $165,000. Are you better off securing that loan with cash for $100,000 and the other part is secured by the machine, or are you just gonna put $100,000 down and only ask for $165,000? Well, the next part might answer your question. Grooming equipment is specialized equipment. You don't see grooming equipment on sales lots in Fairmont, Minnesota. Sorry, Nancy, I didn't see any. You're not gonna see any on your way homes, probably. They're very, very specialized, and they unfortunately do not hold their value. Now, if you wanna argue with me about that, we can talk offline, because I know they don't, because we were looking at trading something off, and the number now has gone actually a little closer to 300,000 if you wanna order something. Yes, a Tucker, because that's Buy America, that's what you can buy, and we have a Tucker with very few hours on it, and we will only get teens on trade. Teens. So, you got, well,
We did it last year and we had the same problem. It was
tough.
$20,000 they offered us for a machine that had less than 2,000 hours on it.
ours had 1,247 hours on it, and we were in the teens, we were less than 20,000.
What year, just out of curiosity?
2004.
Ours was an 11.
They just don't hold the value, and we, in the banking industry, know that. So that's why we don't like to finance groomers. But we can, if you have cash, we can secure the cash or use it, part of it as a down payment. There's also grants, and Nancy would say, well, you didn't talk about grants, but there is grants up there and matching funds. A lot of the grants have matching funds. So just remember that. So if I'm gonna get a grant for 20, you gotta come up with 20, all right? Let's talk about the opposite. We have way too much money. We have gambling funds with all this money. What are we gonna do? What a terrible thing to have, right? But having a lot of money can be sometimes a pain in the butt. So what kind of investments can you make? Well, what I would suggest to you is look at what you need to replace. Do you need to make some asset purchases? So can you leverage that cash that you have now to offset some of the expenses you're gonna have in the future, or a lack thereof of having any equity because of where you're at? So look at your asset purchases. Of course, I'm from the banking industry, so I'm gonna say, go to your local bank and open up a CD, or your credit union and open up a CD, and make sure that it's FDIC insured. So FDIC insurance was raised about 10 years ago to $250,000. So if anything happens, you're gonna get your $250,000 back. If you have more than $250,000 invested in a bank, there are ways around it that you can get more by titling an account a certain way. So, so if it's Woodness has an account with 250,000, Janet can walk in and she can open an account for 250,000, and between the two of them, they have $500,000 worth of coverage if something would happen. So, and then they could put together the Janet and Woody account. That's gonna give them another 250,000, now they have $750,000 worth of coverage. So it's all about how you title your accounts to give you the coverage. And remember what I said earlier, you should have 1 year's expenses in cash reserves. That should be somewhere out of the checking account. It should be in a savings account, it should be in a CD. It should not be sitting in your checking account, okay? So, and with some of the questions that we're talking about before, like with Gail, when she had the gambling money, and we talked, Doug, about what could be spent and what couldn't be spent, a lot of that can be alleviated by not commingling accounts. So taking and breaking accounts out. So I can go out and spend whatever money I want to, as long as it's not RTP funding or any grant money or any benchmark money that's in that account. Now you have to derive that money from some other place, but you know, if you do a fundraiser or something like that, that money should be separated out of your checking account. So when you wanna do the things that don't have the restrictions, you can do it. So if you're gonna have a landowner appreciation and you wanna buy a keg of beer, just don't write it out of the one where the money came, the public money came into your account. This is money that you raise, so have a separate account for those things. So if you wanna buy a case of beer, they don't have any, they can do all the auditing they want. You have the right to spend that money on whatever you want, because it's your money, not their money. So just kind of, you know, you don't have to have one account. It's okay to open a few different accounts. The other thing is, be really, really careful. I have clubs that email and say, Scott, you know, and there are clubs out there, we got a couple $100,000. We talked to our, and I'm not gonna say any names, representative in the area that does investments. He's maybe a financial planner, he's got a little shop in a strip mall, or maybe he's got a freestanding building. And I went to the bank and the CD rate's 0.30, but he can get me 3.25%. Well, red flags go up right away. How can he pay you over 3%? Like, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true, right? So you gotta be really, really careful about doing that. And I warn you, if it's not FDIC insured, you also have to look at the fact, can it lose value? And they legally have to tell you that this CD can lose value. So I work with another nonprofit, it's not a snowmobile association, and that exactly is what has happened. So they went to the little guy in the little hut, and then bragged to me, to the treasurer, that, see, look all the money that we're making compared to what we have in your bank. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, well, let's go ahead and track that. So now the principal from those CDs is going down and going down when I do my monthly treasurer's report. And so I called the little guy in the little hut, and he says, yeah, well, that's normal. I said, well, why is that normal? Well, we told him it was gonna lose value. There's a possibility of losing value. I'm like, well, who are you investing the CD in? Well, the stock market. I'm like, oh, you told them that? Yeah, I told them that. Didn't they say anything? No, I think they just walked in and probably signed the paperwork. So now they don't, you know, the money continues to go down. So if you're gonna do it, yeah, you're gonna get a better yield. No questions about it. But you gotta watch out. Can lose principal, can lose value.
Can we
Be
use
very, huh?
Can we use Bitcoin?
No, get away from Bitcoin. We're not gonna talk about that. Oh my God. That's a whole different seminar on Bitcoin. Although cryptocurrencies, well, okay, I don't like it. Don't do it. So let's prepare our annual balance sheet, okay? So I'm gonna need that when you come in. You say, and it's funny when people come in from the Snowmobile Club, or even just regular people. I need a balance sheet. I'm like, what? A balance? We talked about balance sheet. I'm like, okay, so assets and liabilities. Assets, I heard that before. Liabilities, is that like bad things? I'm like, hey, this is gonna be easy. Yeah, so assets and liabilities get your net worth. And so that's where I screwed up with the township, is I was working with a balance sheet and using different numbers for 2019 values and screwed up. But yeah, so the difference between, and this should be pretty easy. So you got your cash, you got your equipment. My snowmobile club has a picnic table, so I put that in there. I get a little laugh and chuckle about that. They're like, hey, Wakefield, what's the picnic table worth this year? So I list all this stuff. I think it's kind of silly. We have no loans, we have no debt, we're debt free. So it's basically the asset number ends up being our net worth. So.
You're depreciating your picnic table?
Yeah, right. No, it's actually depreciating.
That's what I said.
Yeah, it's made out of wood and it's
Went
not.
up this year.
Yeah, but yeah, right. If I had to replace it, right? I never thought of that.
Appreciated it last year.
So. Moving right along here. Yep. So so we did this seminar a couple years ago, and I said, any questions from the audience? And Larry Shepard, raised his hand, what about embezzlement? He's like, well, it just kind of took me off. I'm like, whoa, he knocked me off the stage and was embezzlement. I'm like, we don't have to worry about that as snowmobilers, do we? And they're like, oh, yeah. Afterward, he's like,
Better believe it.
you better believe it.
80,000 worth.
Yeah, and I just heard about the Fortune Bay up there, $3 million she got. Wow, it's just crazy. So yeah, when we talk about embezzlement, the numbers can go from $5,000 to $3 million up in the Fortune Bay Casino. So how do we fight this thing? Well, there are a number of ways to fight embezzlement. And some of them may be appropriate, so that's why I put if applicable. So can you do a background check, you know? Is the treasurer gonna accept themselves to be subject to a background check? Do you feel comfortable with them? As a snowmobile club, you cannot pull a credit report on them. You're not allowed to do that. You can't go to the bank and ask them to say, is this a good person? They're not gonna give you that information because of privacy laws. So doing a background check is gonna be really hard to do. But you know, there are other ways, you know, that you can find out about people. So I'll just leave it at that. You can go to things on your phone and you can find out, you know, all about Janet if you want to. Google them, right? But really a more important thing is to have clear policies and controls in place to try to stop the embezzlement. So, and I listed a few of them here, you know, use of the club credit card. Who gets it and what's their limit that they can use, and are 2 signatures required? And are those being reported on a monthly basis, the use of the credit card? Another one is receipts, need to have invoices. Reimbursements need to have receipts and invoices. I do not pay anybody any dime until I have a receipt or an invoice. And if I'm not familiar with the person in the invoice, I pick up the phone and find out who the heck this guy is. So we had one the other day that came through, and it was a guy from northern Minnesota, like a far northern Minnesota, way up there in the corner. And we ordered some welding supplies from him. I've never heard of him before, and there was an invoice for $650, and I said, I ain't paying this. So I called the vendor up and I said, tell me a little bit more about your company. He said, who's calling? And so I told him who I was. He's like, why do you need to know about my company? I'm like, because I'm about ready to send you a check, but you know, if you don't give me the warm fuzzies, maybe I won't. Well, you can't do that. I'm like, sir, settle down. Tell me a little bit more about your company. Da, 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 da. He went through it. I've been in business for 35 years, blah, 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 blah. Who contacted you? Oh, Bob contacted me from you guys. I'm like, okay. So, and then what did you supply? And blah, 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 blah. Yes, I sent 3 cylinders of acetylene or da, 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 and then I sent this and da, 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 da. I'm like, yep, that all checks out. Sounds good. Guess I'll get that check in the mail. Click. So, you know, you can use stuff online, but I like to do it the old-fashioned way. I like to call people and talk to them, and you may get that kind of response. Whatever, I'm used to that.
Or they hang up on you.
So, or they hang up on you or whatever. But the key is just do some due diligence. You know, it's the club's money. It's not your money. So let's take the time, because if you do get caught, it's a great excuse to say, hey, I did my due diligence. I called the guy up. I mean, you can see right here, 218-763, blah, blah, blah. His name is Jimmy. I called him up. Jimmy sent us 3 tanks of acetylene and a bunch of other welding supplies. So, I mean, oh, okay. So, I mean, just take the time if you can. We get so busy in our days, but when we talk about money, we gotta slow down a little bit, okay? And then random internal audits. Kind of threw this one up. I got another snowmobile club I'm involved in, kind of a really big one. So that has a big show up in ERX Park. So they had never had any audits done on them. And, you know, we have, that event has 6,000 people go to it. And they're paying probably between $25, $30 just to get in, plus the swap spots are $25 to go swap, and plus all the merchandise. We have an auction, charity auction wouldn't count, but we do have silent auction items. So you can just kind of do the math in your head. 7,000 people, $30 a head. Okay, I got that number in my head. And it's like, when's the last time you guys did an audit? So do you ever audit your tax returns, your financial statements? Financial statements. what are you talking about? It's like, okay, we're gonna start doing an audit. So we got all the books and went through it. It was a disaster. Took a long time to get it done. But anybody on that committee would say, hey, it was a good thing to go through to find out kind of where we're at. Everything checked out fine, it was perfect. It was just some things needed to be changed on the procedures and how things were done. So random internal audits or just internal audits at all. Don't know if any of you guys do you do any internal audits? Okay, let's raise a hand. How many do internal audits? If you're good, all right. I'm liking that, great. Yep, so you wanna go through that stuff and make sure those bank statements are matching those checking accounts, okay? And then Larry, you know, working back to the investment thing, and if all else fails, get an insurance policy. If you're really nervous about, like, I can't prove it, and everything works out fine, but I just got this really sick feeling, and we're talking, we got a lot of money in our club, and I don't wanna make anybody upset, I don't wanna make any accusations about anything like that. If I feel so much better if we could go ahead and get some embezzlement insurance, which covers internal crime, like embezzlement. Fidelity insurance is what it's called. So work with your local agent that you have with your club. I mean, if you don't feel that way, and you don't wanna make anybody upset, you know, do the things that I told you in the top part, but if you just wanna have that, I can sleep at night, and you have a substantial amount of money in your club, call your agent and purchase the insurance. I pay $3,000 a year for a lot of different insurance. I haven't broken out how much of that 3,000 is the embezzlement part of it. Is that what it is? Okay, so 1,200, so basically $100 a month for a year. You can sleep at night knowing that something happens. You know, did Fortune Bay have embezzlement insurance on a $3 million embezzlement, you know?
And random internal audits, you should have different people.
Yes, so I should probably explain a little bit more about that. Yeah, so on the government level, because I am a elected public official, and I'm also a treasurer of that governmental agency, so I can be in the room when the audit is going on, but I can't be involved in the audit. So the audit is conducted by 3 people, and it's basically the bank statement and all the checks and all the deposits are gone through. And we have a special meeting when we do that. It's called the audit meeting. It's required by law in government to have an audit meeting. The clerk is there. She takes the minutes of the audit meeting, and the results of the audit meeting are presented at the annual meeting to all the constituencies that elected me to my office. So that's how we do it. We go through each one, check, 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 check. The clerk's taking copies of that, and I'm there in just an observatory kind of facility or capacity, I should say. So if they have a question, they're like, hey, we noticed this para payment hasn't cleared yet. Well, para is done electronically to the state of Minnesota, so it's an electronic, and it won't show up in a list of checks on a statement typically. You have to go to the electronic transfer part of it, which is usually at the beginning part of a statement or at the end of the statement. And then, oh, lo and behold, there it is, check. So I'm there just in observatory kind of capacity, but I can't answer questions. But my hands have to be off that thing. I can't touch any of that whatsoever. So yes, other people should be doing the audit that don't normally touch the account.
People should be looking at it all the time because nobody wants to do anything. Here's this guy with a checking account.
Yep.
And after 80 grand, and he got, which was the growing match, it's gone. And he gets his fingers slapped, it's all over his.
Yeah, isn't that terrible? Yeah, I've been looking at some of the people that have been convicted, and it's 6 months, 9 months.
Or
nothing.
Or nothing, yeah, you got the Ashby elevator, my good buddy there, the late Lon Rylander, what happened in his town and community. You know, those people lost all that money, it's never to,
And he did a deal it was where he did his own audit.
Yeah, right. The treasurer shouldn't be doing your audits. Somebody, you need to have somebody, and some clubs and entities have audit committees. If you wanna start an audit committee, that's what we did with the big show. We started an audit committee, and we take all the documents and bring them to a guy's house. So we're not even in the same room with the members. They don't even, they know we're meeting, but they have no contact with us. We're completely 35, 45 miles away from them in a separate building going through the audit. And none of them are involved. Treasurer's not involved, the president's not involved, vice president's not involved. If you're a president or vice president, I would not be on the audit committee. I would get people that are members of your club and go through the books. Take the time. Like I said before, we get so busy doing stuff and we're trying to run so fast. But when it comes to money, you gotta slow down.
And that's
got
why
it.
we have a private CBA group.
In some clubs,
Who's not even part of the group.
yeah, that would be a third party disinterested doing an audit. If you can afford to do that, that's the best. But I don't know your all financial situations in all your clubs and what you can afford. So what I'm doing is I'm just offering you information to help you go through it. If you can do that, that would be great. So Larry, did I help a little bit this year on the investment part? Sure. A little bit better? Okay. Final thoughts before we jump to the really bad news, when we get into stealing money. Any thoughts on club finances? Jerry?
When the treasurer, let's say your club buys a groomer and the treasurer signs for the loan, or
Well,
the
he
club,
will, along
like,
with two board members.
The officers sign for the loan, and then new officers come along, who's responsible?
You gotta, the new officers need to go back into the bank, so what I make them do, and we had that happen in Southwest Trails, bought a new groomer, had the original guys in, and then one of the guys came to the bank one day and said, hey, I'm no longer the president of Southwest Trails, so I want my name removed. I said, before I remove your name, we need to put the new president on. So that started a whole new process and application, got him qualified. But the more bigger question is, when somebody leaves and the new person comes on and they're not qualified to borrow the money, what do you do?
Well, you also need a copy of the board minutes showing
The change, yep, we're gonna request that. The minutes of the meeting, the results of the election. So that's how we did it. You know, other financial institutions may have a different way, but I know how we do it. And that's the same way at Core Trust Bank is how we do it. The new person coming in has to apply like it's a brand new loan. The key is, or the problem is, what happens is that person has a 560 credit score and a negative net worth. Now what do you got? Now you gotta really rely on number 2 and number 3.
We had it happen years ago.
And so what did you end up doing there?
Our bank just said, we'll leave it, we'll let it go. We
Yeah.
had a good
They're looking
contract.
more at the club than that person.
Yeah, well, what ended up happening is I left presidency for a year and the guy that took over my job had felonies and
Oh,
horrible.
that one I would be careful of.
So I get a call from the bank and they're like, we got a situation here.
Yeah.
But they
Can
probably
you
didn't
somebody
pay.
instead of the president? They have felonies like that?
You can, yep, you sure can as a
You
club.
could have been designated as.
Yep, as long as the treasurer's on there and one other board member's on there, you could designate somebody that would be willing with really good credit. You know, so like if Delisle says, I'll go ahead and lay on the sword for the club, I don't know why you would do that, but you wouldn't, right, yes,
So you're saying that the treasurer has to be on his signature?
yeah.
Is that legally?
It's not a legal thing, I'm just saying it's a good idea to do it.
We've borrowed money from our bank before.
And not have the treasurer on there.
And they just want 2 signatures, they don't care who it is.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the treasurer, but I would suggest that it would be. It's just a lot easier for reporting, because the treasurer should be, I shouldn't say has, should be reporting to the board on a monthly basis, what's the indebtedness. Plus, remember, he has to put the budget together, plus he also put the financial statement together. So if I'm not the treasurer and I'm not signed on the account, I call up, hi, I'm Tim Heinen, and I wanna know what the balance is on our loan at the bank, and I wanna know what the interest was that I paid last year, and I wanna know what the payments are that we paid last year. sorry, Tim, you're not on the loan, so I can't tell you anything. Well, but I'm the treasurer of the Snowmobile Club, and I need to know this, cause I have these reports due, and I gotta get it done tonight by 7 o'clock. Sorry, Tim, you're not on the note, I can't give you the information. So just for ease of sake, it works a lot easier because of privacy reasons.
That's our bank's requirement. It has to be president and treasurer to sign on.
Yeah, because it's gonna be so much, from our standpoint, it's gonna be so much easier to do that. You know, my treasurer, and I don't know why you'd be your treasurer if he has a criminal record, and you had two really good guys, I take the two guys over the convenience just to let you know. But when I'm doing my groomer loans, I get enough money down that I don't have to worry about it. So you could have Rocky and Bullwinkle sign the loan and everything, so. Yeah, so it all depends on who you are. Ready to switch gears a little bit? We got a little bit of time left.